Hi, welcome to Integration, where we explore the art of moving forward, not just sustaining, but transforming. The great ones among us don't see setbacks, only the landscape of possibility before them. My guests have learned to navigate what is, which is what inspires me, to find ways to keep going and leave the world better than they found it. When the storm comes, they don't just endure, they lean into it. I hope you enjoy my guest today. This particular discussion is really why I created a podcast. And initially, I suggested to Jane that I interview her. So I have gone about learning how to do podcasts in order to do this next interview. At the end, I will be asking you what you thought of it and inviting you to respond as to whether you'd like to hear more. So please take the time to listen to it. I have listened to this particular video many times as I've been editing it and wondering how and what to put in and what to leave out. So on that note, please enjoy. Hey, I'm really excited to talk to Jane Slattery. She works in a very different, let's say, industry. It's hard to even call it an industry, but it is an industry. Believe it or not, there is a whole world out there of people working in different elements. And I'm going to start by seeing what Jane comes up with to define herself. And then I'll come up with something to define it. Jane does work in the agricultural sector. And I'm going to get her to just talk a little bit about her journey from childhood and her lovely normal background that she started off with. And then at 16, she had a big change in her life that took her off in a direction that gave her a whole lot of background. And then she came back to work with her family's business. And I'm going to get her to tell you a little bit about that journey because I think it informs some of the things that she's going to talk about a little bit today.
Oh, you want me to discuss all of that? Hello, Sam.
Hello.
I've been so looking forward to this, which is really strange for me. Yeah, where did I start from? I actually come from a generational farming background. My father was quite entrepreneurial, always looking at things through different lenses, always wanting to investigate things a lot deeper. And I think I've stepped into a lot of his gene pool because I've always been very curious about so many things in life. I was a bit of a rebel, is probably the way that I would explain it. And I suppose all it was just to feel free. It's basically the day I turned 16, I literally had my bag packed and I walked out of home. And then I was on this journey from there. I ended up getting called back home. I left school early. I was taken in with a beautiful Aboriginal family, Aboriginal mother, white father, and it was just amazing to just live in that environment and just see how special their relationships were with one another. And I sort of come from a world where we didn't really have a lot as children. We grew up pretty poor just because of things that happened with my dad and his work. And then we sort of were doing quite well when we would have been considered to be not wealthy, but like we had a colour TV when they come out comfortable and we didn't really want for a lot. And I thought I didn't really see that. And then sort of moved in with a family and they just all helped one another. And it was like this, it was just so different. And I formed a very, very special relationship and still do have a very, very special relationship with the family. So much so that I ended up marrying one of the brothers and then I'm not married to him anymore. But so I do have two children from it was a beautiful relationship, but there was just things that happened. I learned so much and I sort of was as big a part of their life as they were in my life. So that really, I guess, helped me to understand something about myself, which I probably didn't really understand then. And that was probably when I would say setting myself free to just be able to explore and experience that part of life that it has been such a privilege to have that experience because I probably wouldn't be who I am today without that. It sort of put me in touch with something within me that maybe I was starting to sort of reject. And then it brought that back to me. So it brought that feeling that's in me of how important it is to hold on to that and not let go of that. And then, of course, from there, I went into different things.
Let's go back then from there. How did you go back into the agriculture space from there?
Well, my dad always was in the agricultural space and he developed a 3-tier piggery, which was a conventional intensive piggery. And he brought me back in to work with that. So he opened up an office in Victor Harbour where I live and I worked there was a manager there as well. So I sort of did all the office work and then that was very successful and it was all about producing the food to get it to the consumer. And it was about filling the piggeries, which were manufactured. He designed them, he manufactured them. And it was filling the piggeries with pigs and then getting the product for the people that bought the piggeries to the consumer. So my dad, probably right from when I was born, always was focused on how to get good food to people. He had a dairy, he had a piggery, and he was always, and my mum will always say, he was always playing with stuff that he shouldn't have been playing with, because it was, she probably saw the hard side of it, where he invested a lot of his time and the money that he did have into new ventures, and they weren't always necessarily successful, probably because he was trying to do them himself. He was very entrepreneurial, but maybe then that backup system wasn't there. But that's helped me to understand a lot of things growing up with that. And in the early days, I probably didn't look at it like I do now. Anyway, that business fizzled out for reasons, not necessarily because of my father, because of external governments. And I was sort of brought in to deal with the creditors. So I learned from a very young age how to deal with people. And I don't know why I was even put in that situation. I think I was only about 17 when that happened. And it's like, here I am dealing with all these creditors that all this money was owed to. But it gave me a good footing into what people can be like. Yeah. And then from there, we went on to...
Where did the animal products that you were selling to farms come in?
So that came in after that. So once that all fizzled out, he still played, he was still mucking around with things. From the age of 15, he'd always played around with free choice minerals to animals. From a young boy. Once the piggery side of it finished, he started still playing, working with farmers, had these mineral mixes that he somehow put together. He wasn't a trained nutritionist. It was just something that he just knew what to do. And so it came from a deep knowing within him, is the way I would explain it. And it came to me and he said, look, got this happening. I knew what was going on because he had all these sheep in a shed, and there was this varroa gene, and they would have multiple births, up to 5, 6 babies at a time, and we used to have to look after them. And he just said to me, he said, I reckon this is really good what we've got going. He said, but I can't go and start a business. Would you like to do this with me? And I just like, okay. And he said, you're going to have to go and borrow some money. I went, okay. And he said, you'll have to go and borrow $60,000 so we can get this business going. I was like, I didn't have anything. I had an old bomb car, and I was just...
Did you put the collateral up for that, for the bank to give you?
I didn't. I just went to the bank and I just said, I need $60,000 to start this business.
And they loaned it to you?
And they loaned it to me. No, with no backing.
How bizarre.
I know. It was so bizarre. And it's very hard to remember back to then as to how on earth did that happen. But that gave us the start. And then from there, Dad was the salesman. I was the person in the office. He probably did a lot of the mixing, but my brothers sort of came in.
So at this point, you haven't really had much exposure to the animals. You're doing admin.
Yeah, I'm doing admin, but there was always animals in the background. So I guess I had exposure to animals from the day I was born, but they weren't a big part. Like where we lived, I always had a horse. We always had food on, sometimes we lived in the towns because we moved a lot too. So I was a bit like a nomad. We learned how to be very adaptable. From the time I was born to 8, I think I worked out we moved 13 times. That's a lot, going to different schools and that. But I don't know. It was, it was good. So I guess it was a bit like a gypsy. But that was all.
I'm more talking about your connection to animals in terms of what happened later that developed to be what you do now?
Well, and that really came from the free choice minerals. Again, it was once my dad ended up having a heart attack, somebody had to step into the technical side. There was only one person that could do that. That was me. And it was lucky that I had a team of people around me, a really good team of people in admin, marketing, and we'd sort of set up this really good system. So I jumped into the technical side and I started responding to the farmers, which were all over Australia, that were working with the products. And from that, I learned things about myself that I didn't really know, because I was able to, working with this program that we had where the farmers would record, they would report the amount of product the animals were taking. We would put that through a program and then it would spit out this information, and the information would say the animals are taking X, Y, Z. And then there would be this pattern that would form. And from that pattern, I was able to sort of work out what it was that the animals needed added on farm, so what nutrition the animals needed on farm to bring they were called feed value indicators. So it was 2 supplements, 5 feed value indicators, but it was to bring the feed value indicators into balance.
And so then you'd go out onto the farm. That's when you were starting to, no, you're just doing it all on computer.
Yeah, I did it all remotely. And back in those days, not like now, it was, it was just through email. Yeah. So I just have to send a report and then I send it by email to them. So, and then they get all their recordings broken down into, so they could sort of see what was going on. And I'd say, these are the changes you need to make. And then they would go out and make the changes. And then a week or so later, they would report back and I'd be able to see whether those changes were effective or not.
Okay, so you've got years of background in what we could say is a fairly conventional model of nutrients to animals on farms, adapting to the individual farmers what they needed. So
100%.
what is the next sort of significant thing that occurred for you to change you doing that?
Well, as I was sort of working with that, I started picking up on things, and then it was like, why are the animals like, there were certain things that would happen. I found it fascinating that there were like organic farms where the intakes would go really high. Not always, but it would be, why is that happening? Or a biodynamic farm, the intakes would go really high, or there wouldn't be any intakes at all. And yet the animals weren't necessarily doing well. So it was always about the animals because it was about the condition of them. So we were always monitoring fecal samples. There was also like, it wasn't just reporting intakes, there was visual indicators as well. And then there would be things like back then they were starting to sort of, there was clients that were time control grazing and the animals would be in one cell and it would be okay. Then they'd go to the next one and the intakes would go through the roof. And I mean through the roof, where they were actually living on the products, yet there was feed in the paddock. And I just found it so fascinating. Like, I actually had farmers all over Australia that I could see all this stuff going on, and it was just coming into where I was able to see this wealth of information that it was, I probably didn't appreciate it then, and I probably only just started to appreciate it now as to just how much information that was coming to me about all these things going on across Australia. So there was drought conditions, there was like where there was too much green feed and just all the ways the animals react. And then I started to like, it's like the animals started talking to me and saying, hang on a minute, we're not really happy here. Like, can you do something? It's like, what is that? Like, and I sort of pushed that aside. So what I started to realize is I was starting to pick up on feelings when there was this feeling that would come through when I would get certain reports. And I also at the same time, because working with organic, biodynamic, all sorts, just worked with everybody, I started to become more aware of there was different ways of working. So there was people that were sort of opening up how that they ask questions with divining rods or muscle testing or dowsing with a pendulum. And so I started to want to find out more about that. And some like people would come and visit me. I didn't necessarily go out to them. And then we'd sit down and there was always just something that just something didn't feel right in me. And that's okay. So I would push that away a little bit. And then all of a sudden I just started to, I was seeing a kinesiologist because I always had a sore neck, and that was sitting probably on the phone and typing on the computer. And she said to me one day, she said, look, I've just downloaded all this information. Would you like to come and do this course? And I went, yep. It's just something in me said, you've got to do this, Jane. Just, you've got to do it. Had no idea what it was going to be about. So there was, only being me and this other lady that did this over a long weekend course. And in doing that, I actually learnt to muscle test. And when I did that, there was just something that clicked on in me. And because we had to sort of do where we had to sort of work on each of us as we were doing this.
People sometimes might know it as kinesiology.
Well, it was, because I was seeing a kinesiologist, but it wasn't kinesiology I learnt. It was called Essence of the Heart. It was a lady called Jo. I've lost touch with her. And then she just guided us through this process. And then from that switched something on in me. But what it did was switched something on in me that I could work with muscle testing. And I had a way of what I was getting inside me. I had a way of asking questions about what it was that it's like there was this information that was coming to me, but I didn't know what it really meant. So I could then ask questions about what this information was. Was this information for me? So I was able to use the muscle testing in that way and learn a bit more about myself. Then I started to sort of introduce that into my work. And then that took me to being able to work with my clients, not all of them, because not many people were open to that.
So just describe what that is like the first time you walked onto a farm and opened yourself to that.
I didn't walk onto a farm.
Oh, you're doing this remotely still?
It was still remotely. The only thing that I had my own farm. So I had my own, like with the business when my dad wasn't able to sort of do the work that he had done previously and I took over doing the technical. I needed to practice what I was preaching, basically. So I had a key man insurance policy, luckily, on Dad, and that allowed me to then buy property and then stock it with all different animals so I could play around. And my younger brother worked with me. And
so you're still using the nutrients on the animals at that point?
Everything was done with the nutrients. So I was
And doing data analytics, you were doing the same data analytics that you were
Yep.
reading across the nation?
Yep. So my brother would do all that and send it in, and then we'd analyze it. But then it started to become, why are we doing this? Like, I'm going to ask questions and see what happens. And so we just started playing. And then from that, we learnt a lot, because basically, to simplify it, we learnt that it was all about energy. And then trying to explain what energy was, that just I just got lost then, because I knew something, but I didn't know how to explain it. So then I guess that's where my journey really began, because once I got that information, it was like I couldn't work with products anymore. In hindsight, I probably could kept going that way, but it held me back because it had me stuck behind a desk where I was totally there to be there for every person that I was working with, and I had no freedom. That's what I started to realize. So what I thought was, okay, I need to stop doing this business. I didn't even consider selling it. And the reason I didn't consider selling it was because it was really hard to teach to other people how to do it. Like, I was trying to teach to the clients how they could do it without relying on me. But I found that it just didn't happen. They needed me to tell them what to do. And I think I got sick of telling people what to do, and was like, why can't you figure this out for yourself? So anyway,
it's not very transferable long term, is it, to have to be only you at the centre of everything on a farm?
No, not at all. And it also was, what happens if something happened to me? And the other bit was that a lot of people only fed a few mobs. They didn't feed all their animals. And I used to have this real deep belief that it was the breeding stock that should be fed. And then from there, from the breeding stock, the younger stock are going to be better anyway. We used to talk then about through getting the animals metabolically right, then the genetics of the animals would change, which is probably what is termed epigenetics nowadays. But the animals would then change to their environment, and they would become more adaptive. You know, one of the biggest health benefits, which I wasn't allowed to claim back in the day, was the animals didn't need to be drenched or dipped. So there was no internal or external parasites if people worked with it properly. And that was a huge thing, because we knew that when animals were being drenched, and there's nothing wrong with that. If an animal needs to be drenched, it needs to be drenched. If it's got lice, it needs to be treated. Anything that goes on an animal, it needs to be treated. I don't have an issue with that. But I also knew that if they were healthy, they didn't need those things, because they wouldn't attract.
So really what you were trying to eradicate was preventative, unnecessary drenching, etc., to animals.
Yeah, instead of using, it's like the chemical use is seen as a cure. And what I was probably working on, whether I really understood it then or not, I was working on preventing that from happening. So if the animals were healthy, then they didn't seem to have an issue with worms or lice. And even if there was one animal, we would find that there'd be one or two animals, or maybe, 10 in a mob, that might get lice, but the others didn't. Or they might need drenching, but the others didn't. And so then that was just culling process. So you would cull those animals out, and you would keep the ones that didn't need drenching.
Did you sort of work out why those odd ones were having that occurring? Was that genetics, or was it something else? Or did you ever find anything out about what that was?
Now what I'd say, if you want to know, because what I would say now is very different to what I believed then. So now I would say that they were just animals that were trying to show people something that the people needed to learn about themselves. And I know that animals will take themselves out to help their people that are looking after them, that are caring for them, to understand.
So that's going to be a concept very hard for people to realise.
I get it. I totally get that.
So that's fine. We'll come back to that. We'll just peg that one. Because I think part of this journey is, in doing this conversation even with you, is that there is elements in my experience with you, because I've been following you for a while now, is that there's stuff that you maybe struggle to articulate, but absolutely there in your journey. Part of this story is really to help you with the articulation of how you got to where you are now, and because that is quite an extraordinary journey in itself. So let's go back to this point where maybe the point where you do start to go onto the land with the animals. Go from where you were in the office to where you got out there.
Well, and the other thing I could say there is what I learnt was certain elements would help the animal to be able to resist. So working with nutrition, which is where I was then, there were certain elements that would help the animal. If the animals, so for instance, if they had a problem with worms, internal parasites, then copper played a big role. But it was, how do we work with the copper? And if there was an issue with lice, and I mean, it's not just simply one element, but it's a part of it. And if it was lice, it was to do with sulfur. And that's what I learned working with the nutrients, is how to put them together on farm, like how to custom blend them, which is what I was getting the farmers to do, custom blend them so that the animals could generate their own energy, which when they generated their own energy, they didn't need the feed value indicators. And those feed value indicators all monitored a different energy requirements. I can remember them as like plain as day. But one was a digestible energy, one was metabolizable energy, one was net energy for maintenance, net energy for performance, and then there was another one. There was 5.
And fertility outcomes, were they
all
all
of
part
those? All of that is because if the animal was healthy, it's just the whole environment changed. So it was through the animal that we would see changes in the paddocks, the grasses that would grow, the paddocks, like the paddocks where the animals were defecating and urinating because of them being in balance, were different to the paddocks on the other side of the fence. And it happened so quickly. And all that was about was letting the animals choose what they needed so that they could maintain balance. And then by them maintaining balance, they could sustain the environment in which they were living.
By feedback.
Yep, by feedback. And through, if they couldn't get the balance, then their environment became them being out of balance. So it was always, the environment was always, or the landscape, whatever, wherever those animals were, was always a reflection of what those animals were in that moment, like what was presenting. So, yeah.
So can I give an analogy of that? Because my experience of talking to Diane that you worked with in the natural intelligence was that they'd take animals that were doing well and they'd put them, or already doing well, and then they'd put them on dead land, maybe not even anything growing, put some food on it, and the animals their bodies would deplete, and then they'd take them off and put another lot of healthy animals on. And basically you'd repair the land with the healthy animals, putting stuff in, taking the animals off at the time. That was where I was up to when I was observing. I don't know if it's changed now, but that was what they were doing when I was over there.
Well, probably when I started with Diane, they were just on the one property where they were feeding, because they were feeding the products. And it was working with Diane that I got to understand a lot more because of where they would allow it to go to. And there was a couple of other people as well, because we sort of formed a little bit of a group to be able to ask questions and to really understand way deeper what we could never get to by just looking at the physical side of things.
Okay, so I've probably jumped the gun a bit here. You were starting off with your own, your brother working with the animals, working on the interaction of the nutrients, and you're starting to develop this ability to feel and sense what is the difference between the nutrients, the animals, and you in this whole thing. Where did you start to then? Did you start straight off with Diane, or were there other farms that you were working with before you got to them?
Oh, no, there was lots of farms that I was working with before I got to Diane. The business started in 1987, and I started working with Diane in 2001. It's just that it'd been very much about working with the physical products. And then once I started working with Diane, a couple of years into it, I started to realize you don't need physical products to be able to work with animals for them to be able to maintain balance.
Even the biodynamic and organic people, which were always worked with energetics and different things.
Yeah.
They were still working very much with inputs at that point.
Yeah, and some of the biodynamic and organic farmers actually had the hugest intakes. And it was through the work that I did at home on Ocean View, was my property's name. It was through the work that I did there with myself and my brother that we learnt about the energy side of things. When the animals, it was always, we just need energy. And so then I was thinking, you don't need protein. You're telling me you need energy. Is it protein? This was through asking questions. Then I started with starch and sugar, because I was thinking, what is just energy without protein, without minerals?
Physical. Yeah.
I was thinking physical because that's all I could think. That's all I knew.
It's a scientific paradigm, isn't it? Absolutely.
Is. And that's what I was in. I was in this conventional mindset that the more you do and the more you put on, and what you've got to do is you've got to be out there and you've got to be trying to fix things. That was my paradigm.
Energy
then.
in, energy out. That's the way they talk.
Yep. But it was all about what can I bring onto the farm so that I can fix whatever is going on. I was in 100% fix mode, because that's all I'd learnt. It was like you had to feed the animals. I knew that I had to, got to get them in balance, because they're not in balance. Why are they sick? They shouldn't be sick. So if I do this, they're going to get better. And my whole focus was, my love was the animals. My love was not the people at all. It was, why can't you look after your animals properly? Why can't you understand that your animals need this? And totally not appropriate how I thought back then. but it was how I thought. And
Well,
because it's how we
appropriate or
were
not is-
taught. And it's how we're taught. We're taught that we've got to do things to make things better. And, and to do that, we've got to take something out of the earth and we've got to feed that back to an animal for it to go back into the earth. That's sort of the mentality that I had then.
And still, I would say 90% of the planet, 99% of the planet has still today.
Look, and that's all fine. People can work with whatever they want to work with. This is just my journey and what I learned through my journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's an amazing journey. It's a fascinating journey to what I've experienced and how all those things just happened. Like I'm in awe of my own journey now because of just the things that I've learned. It got to the point that why am I putting all this on? It also, a drought happened, and this is 2006, had a group of farmers that took me over to Western Australia. And that's when I first met Di. And
have you started working with the energy at this point?
I was working with the energy then, but I was still working with physical product. Oh, well, no, I was still working with physical products, but I was also working with the energy side. So I was very much into asking questions to understand what was going on within environments and trying to understand.
Was it starting to reduce the amount of product needed as you asked the questions?
When I understood that if I worked on the people, and this was early days, if I worked on the people, the animals stopped taking the products. And then when the people...
When you say worked on the people, what does that mean for our listeners?
Well, I started to just work, and I guess that happened through doing that Essence of the Heart course, which was, 3 days. It was nothing. But it just clicked something in. It connected me with something within myself. So working on self, it was like just kept getting this thing and something would pop in and I would say, do I need to say that to the person? I really don't want to. I really don't want to say that. No, I'm not saying that. So I fought it so much. No, cannot say that. And then eventually what would happen is something would happen where, I don't know, something would go wrong. All right. There would be something that would go wrong. So, okay, I've got to say this, right? How am I going to do this? I just go say that. They're just going to, anyway. This is how it all started. And eventually I just got more comfortable with, I just need to say this. And a lot of my work was...
So I want you to give an example of how wacky it was for you. Like one of the first times. Say the first time you got a message from an animal and you went, oh, I'm just going to say it. Maybe the person was receptive, whatever. And what the result was from that experience. Like what happened to the animal, what happened to the farmer, what happened to the land. Just say that first experience, even though you were resisting it totally.
It's really hard to remember a first experience because of where I am now to where I was there.
Yeah.
Probably my first experience, it might not have been about you asked me a question. So the first thing that sort of comes to me is it was probably more about realizing that the energy wasn't flowing in the environment. So I was able to pick up on that. I was able to go, what's going on over there? Then whatever they'd say to me and say, right, okay, we need to work with that.
I'm going to stop you a little bit more on this just because I'm going to get for listeners to get this sensation. Would this energy flowing thing be a bit like imagining a paddock that has a river running through it and the river stops at the fence line and starts at the other, like it's a flow of energy, like a river stopping and starting, like it's a trickle? And it can go all the way through. Is it that sort of visual, depictoral sort of sensation for you of how energy flows? Is it descending from things? Is it physical? Is there any sensation for you pictorially that you could analyze like a metaphor to how that sensation of energy flowing means to you?
I don't get a picture. It's like yeah, I know, but it's like there's a blockage. So it's like I get stopped. And it's like something would block me.
Like you've walked into a wall.
Yeah. It's like, even though I wasn't there, it was still like, well, I could. What I understand now is I could connect with it wasn't me connecting, the energies would connect with me. Yeah. And that's...
I'm going to give you another analogy and see if this helps you with your articulation. I have a girlfriend that can tell when people are lying. And she said for her, it's like you're connected with your heart to the other person. And suddenly, she said, I literally physically fall into the space because the energy that was holding us apart suddenly goes because the person has removed it. And she said, and I fall into it. I physically fall into it because I feel this because the person has started to lie. And that's how she experiences it. She's very in her body type of person. So sometimes people have got a sensory thing going on they haven't yet learned to articulate. And I think actually we all have these. And so finding ways to explain that thing that you put in the background, which you've been talking about all the way through this, which is great, because I think a lot of people actually will connect with that and realize there's things that they don't acknowledge. I think bringing that alive is really important.
Yep. So the first thing I'll say is it definitely doesn't come from outside of me. That's one thing I'll say. I can articulate that. It comes from deep within me.
Good.
So it's definitely not outside. But yet I used to ask things outside to try and understand something. But
is that because it was easier to confront in yourself, that it was like,
I think that's just because that's the language I knew. I only knew how to ask things external. I didn't know how to bring it back to me and ask from internal what it was that what I needed to understand and what I needed to understand to have a conversation with a person. So because what I find I do now is the conversation that I have is it's like the person is trying to have a conversation with themselves, but they can't hear themselves. So I get the conversation and then I voice it. And then they
totally
go,
understand
that. And I said, I don't know how I know that. What does that mean to you? That means a lot to me. And I have no idea what it is that means to them.
For me, I totally know this thing you're saying. For me, it's like when the person's standing there, they're telepathically screaming it, and it's like it's screaming out like this, and they are here so they can't see it. So I just say, well, I can see all this that you're saying, and they go, how do you that? I go, well, you're saying it. It's not me, it's you saying it. So that's it. And then they go, oh yeah, it's me. Sort of that kind of sensation.
And then so you're able to say that you can see that because you just did that, right?
Yes.
And so what I've learned is I hear. So I hear mine is
visual. That makes sense.
That's right. You're a visual where mine is so I just hear the slightest little tink, and it's the most, and then that little tink is something to me. Hang on a minute. Right. That's where you need to go. So, and that's something I've learned over a long period of time to be able to really.
So let's go back. So I took us right out there. Let's go back to the first time
we do this.
Okay. It's going to be a long editing cycle for me. Okay. So you go back to, you're working with farmers, you're on land, you're still working with the nutrients, you're already starting to get sensory messages from the land, the animals, the people, and you're sorting all that out for yourself. And you, at that moment, we've got this one example I was getting you about to say where I interrupted you, where you didn't want to say something and then you forced yourself to say it. And what occurred in that moment for the farmer, the land, the people, the animals, whatever.
That's really, really hard to answer, Sam, to do all of that. But okay, so it was probably very much more about the animals, and they were saying they weren't happy. So then it was, well, what do you need to be happy? So I got to a point where I could ask that. And then because of the nutritional language, it was like I still could find a way to energetically work with the minerals. So what I would go is say that they were like, it was always that. It was always like there was a problem before I would be brought in to deal with it. All right. It wasn't, although I wanted to work preventative, which is what working with the nutrients is about. Most people wait till they've got a problem. They don't want to work with preventative because they don't see the sense in that. So there would be a problem. And so, okay, the dog's got sick, or the sheep have got worms, or the sheep have got lice, would be a whole thing about, right, now we need to understand why that has happened. And what I learned is as we would go through asking questions, working with yes, no answers. So it was learning to frame questions, learning to put the right context in there. We would then get to understand where that happened, why that happened. And then once we got that, it's like the person's head went, I can understand that. So at that point, they could actually then go, that makes sense to me. Once it made sense to the person, it's like there was this change in the animal straight away.
They could take ownership for it and be connected to it.
Yeah. But until that, and there was a long drawn out session, like to ask those questions, and I just have to trust what popped in. Like there would just be something, oh, we need to go there. Or if you go, oh, this is popping into me. Can we ask questions about this? What happened 3 days ago? They'd start telling me something. No, we need to go there, right? That's what I would hear. It's got something to do with that. And we would just keep going and going until we got some form of understanding. And and then everything would come back into balance. And then it would be okay for a while until the person would get back in there. What I call, my saying is get out of head, get into heart. But they'd get back into their old pattern or their old way of thinking, and it would all start to happen again. And
so is that a little bit that the person, I mean, let's just analogize it to going to school and you learn patterns of survival because of bullies or whatever, and you get a thinkingness. And then when you get nervous or fearful, you go back into your pattern of shell to protect yourself, let's say, as an analogy. So you go out into life, you've left school, you don't have those bullies around anymore, but something comes along in the world and you go back into that modality to protect yourself. And some people work on stuff, some people never work on stuff. And so that journey of getting you to go, hey, you're actually here in present time right now. That bully isn't here. You don't need that modality to work. You're kind of helping the farmer get more and more exercise that muscle of being present, looking at what is and not thinking, but just being with the land.
Yeah, but being with themselves. So not being with the land. That's a lot of people. Yeah, it's being with themselves, being present with themselves, really being able to actually understand what is going on in them every moment, like totally present in everything they do in life, which is take complete ownership.
That's very hard, isn't it?
Well, but that's what this is about.
Yeah, but I'm just saying for most people, when you think about how much distraction there is in the world with the internet, with families, with money, with all the things that happen in people's lives to distract them from being present. And there's this big movement for mindfulness and meditation. And I think it's interesting because it's like exercising that being okay to be with me thing, but just be with myself, and then start to actually stretch that out into existing in life.
Yeah. Because in saying that, when you say meditation, I don't actually meditate. It's a form of quietening the mind, 100%. And and I know how helpful that is to people that have busy minds, but it only lasts for as long as until you get back into what you're doing. It's during that time they get peace, or whatever they get, because only each individual knows what they get from whatever they're doing. But so that's not really sustaining.
No, you're going to be able to still keep jogging, patting your head, rubbing tummy, doing your things, doing this, and still be doing that.
Yeah, so you need to be able to be present with everything else that's going on. And I guess that's what I've learned.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going back to this thing. You've got the farmer there. You're getting the moment. You're getting the communication to tell them something, you get them through to that point. So then tell me some of the experiences that you've had on land where you have randomly said something that you've been told to say, and what happened for the farmer, the animal, and the land in front of you.
What, present things or past?
Maybe
in the early days?
Start in the past and then move forward as you became more confident with it.
Well, probably, most of it was around the animals, and then the past is changing. And if I just keep it more around that, and probably the people work was sort of always a little bit on the back burner. My focus was more about, you got to get them animals right, because if I get the animals right, they'll fix the environment. That stayed my focus for a long time. It was hard to sort of let go of that, but it's to the wonder of the people starting to realize just how much that by seeing their animals doing that helped them a lot, because it helped them to let go, to not try and control the animals so much. Let the animals be the guide. Let the animals show them things that they may not have actually allowed them to show them before. Learn from the animals. Yes. And that takes time. To sit there and just watch and observe. A lot of people don't do that. They're just in this, I've got to do this, 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 and this. And the animals, as much as the animals, their business, and if the animals are not performing properly, well, money's going somewhere, and it's certainly not coming into the bank account. Yeah, so there's so much. So it was to get the focus onto the animals, and I knew that the animals knew how to fix their environment. I certainly didn't know. I just had an understanding of that if I help the animal with this in this situation, it will be able to be metabolically healthier, which the visual cues through the feces and them being able to resist internal and external parasites and all the other things that happen. That was, to me, that was huge if they could do that. Yeah. And then it was really mastering that. I don't know, that just become, well, that's not hard to do. And I learned to do that energetically without using any products.
So was that with Diane? Is that because you cite them as being kind of your big playing field, but say, I know you were working with other farmers and had been for many years before you met them, but why were they sort of integral in why you've then formed Natural Intelligence Farming?
Because when I closed the business in 2006, I lost a lot of clients because they didn't have the products anymore, which I didn't even think of those things back in those days. I went, I just can't do this anymore. I'm out. I need to go mingle with people and I need to go find out about who I am and what I do, because I felt weird. I felt like I was this different person and I didn't fit in anywhere because of things that I was picking up on. I just didn't know how to articulate it. I remember saying to Di, I said, Di, this is what I'm going to do, but there's some stuff that's with me that I need to leave with you energetically. Like, I remember saying that. Why I said that then, I don't know, but it was like I had to sell my farm and everything with what I decided to do. So I didn't actually have a physical home base where I was working with animals.
She was released again.
I was released again, which is all fine because...
And I will say this decision to make, just for people listening, how much was this nutrient business turning over at the time when you closed it down?
Well, when I closed it down, I was winding it down. So it wasn't turning over as much because I was...
Well, at its heyday, what was it turning over?
Oh, a couple of mil a year,
so
which is a lot back in those days.
And not an insignificant amount of money to start basically sabotaging your own business by changing their need for the animals to need the nutrients or the dependency of farmers on you. So this is, from an integrity point of view, I felt this is important to say because a lot of people attribute things with money. And I think sometimes in these more alternative things, staying true to your integrity when there's money and food to need to be put on the table is possibly the most difficult part of it. So at that time, where were you also let's say in terms of your dependents, your children needing you to feed them and look after them and like all that sort of thing? Were they a bit older?
They were teenagers, so it's not like they were totally dependent on. They were starting to be their little wild childs as well. And what Mum did, they did become their little rebels. Yeah, so I was in an okay situation, and I did have this man come to me and he said, I'll lend you the money to... have no idea where he came. I called him Father Christmas. He just came into my life and he just said, I will pay for all the whatever needs to be done to wind the business up. He took something over the farm for that and he said, I'll give you 18 months to sort yourself out. What do you want to do? I have no idea why that even happened, but it did. And at the end of it, it was good because we sold the farm, he got his money and there was, really nothing left, and that didn't matter to me. I was on a different journey by then, but it gave me that transition time from me just shutting the doors to where did I want to go to.
What sort of time has elapsed from now that you shut the business in 2006? How much time did this take? Another 2 years, so 2008, 7 or 8? This is when you're starting to be on this journey?
I moved to Adelaide, so I needed to put myself in with people. So I'd been so used to working with animals and not so used to working with people. And working with farmers is very different to working with people in a town or in a city. And I was terrified of the city. Like, to me, that was toxic. Here's me, this lady, probably a sort of greenie, but not loved organic. It was all about working with nature. The whole thing that I did was how much can I work with nature without using chemicals, all those sorts of things. And then I go into Adelaide, which I thought was just toxic, full of chemicals. You breathe the air, you sort of take in all the fumes from the cars and all that sort of stuff. And it's like, that's where I had to put myself. And that was an experience in itself, but it was the best thing that I could have done. And I needed to do that. You met me around, it had to have been 2007, 2008. I was raw when you met me.
You were really raw.
I was like, really raw.
You were almost hiding. You were like, this is so much.
Yeah, because I'd come out of something that I was really quite confident with, other than trying to explain the energy thing. That was the only bit that I just didn't know how to do. But I was really confident in the way that I could work with animals.
I would say that's taken you almost 15 years.
And even now, I'm still trying to explain it.
But it's hard for people. I think that's really the hard thing.
Well, it's trying to put it into a language that other people can understand it. I understand. I don't need words because it's not really words. Then you've got to try and find words that people can resonate with to then look at it that you're not woo-woo or witch or a demon or whatever it is that. And I'm not fussed with what the external world really thinks about it, because it's just a knowing that I have, but it's a knowing that I know is so important, especially when I meet the people that I meet that are so stuck or lost or just so lost in life. And many of these people that I work with, not just only now, are farmers, and they work in it is such a privilege to be a farmer, but it also is so hard to be a farmer. Because so many farmers get taken advantage of, but then there's other farmers that don't. And why does this happen to one and not to another? And I've just always been fascinated. I guess that was the other side I looked at with working with the products and working with people all over Australia was, why has this happened to this farmer and that happened to that farmer? Why isn't it all the same? How come this person can just get their product to market and it's just like an absolute breeze. And then another person sabotages themselves. Yet they're the most, there's really not a lot of difference between who the people are other than maybe the life that they've had, which then starts to go into that other stuff, genetics, all those DNA and what's happened in people's lives and what they've been exposed to from the time they were born and probably before they were born and all those sorts of things.
So I want to just go back just a little bit more because we haven't really touched on some of the reactions on the land yet that really started to cement your, let's say, not just your expertise, but your own confidence in what you were doing on the land and the certainty that you were so certain at this point you've sold your business to go and continue doing it, and you've gone into the city to develop things. But before we got to that, we haven't really said what happened to the animals on the land.
But I think it's what happened to me. I don't think it's about, there was lots of things happening with the animals and the farms because of the products, but almost.
No, with the energetic stuff when you've started to actually make headways in that.
Yeah, but I think it was more what was happening within me, because a lot of the people didn't really get it. And I'm only really just starting to get it. A lot of people that I was trying to work with then, through me working that way, which was asking the questions, which isn't probably so much just the energetics then.
I want to go back to that point because I think we haven't sort of illustrated how powerful this thing was in the effect that it had on the farmer, on the animals and on the land. And yes, it's like, because we'll go back to that. I just want to do a little bit of, even if it's not as effective as it is now, because you've developed so much, it has to be something that has triggered your awareness of why this is such an important thing for you to continue doing.
But I think it really comes to me because it was how I felt. I don't think it's so much about what was happening. Like I know what the nutrients did. I know that definitely, but there was some people it worked for and some people it didn't work for because some people just wouldn't, it was costly. And it's because it was costly. I just felt there had to be a better way because it's like they were doing their best to get the products out to the animals, keep the products up so that they could get a proper recording to be able to send to me so that I could actually then help them to understand what to do. And in that, there was stuff going on in me energetically, but a lot of that in the early days, I didn't really communicate that. And when I did try to communicate it, Di, so grateful for Di because she worked with me. There was another person that sort of was working with Diane, and it wasn't so easy to communicate that to him. So a lot of people, I was like, because if I didn't sell a product, I still had to make money somehow. I had this knowing in me that I could work energetically, and I proved that on my own farm with my brother. Like I proved it, and
So you actually realized that you had a way to raise farmers' profitability by actually getting them to be able to work without needing inputs by just working on their energetics, which is now where you are now, and you're getting stronger and better at it.
Yeah.
So this journey is really about you not only getting your chops up, but getting your certainty in what it is you do and how you do it and how you bring about that certainty in the farmer that you're working with.
Yeah.
And this is the really critical part of what this podcast is about, is that word certainty is really, and I did say something to you, I'm going to read it offline. It really was about getting people to glimpse at the infinite limitlessness of their own sovereignty and power.
Yeah.
So, and that really starts with you getting to recognize your own limitless of your own sovereignty and power in yourself.
Yep.
So that journey is a little bit of why we're telling this whole story, because you had physical things occurring, like someone comes out of the blue and sponsors you. And so something was sitting right in your Zen journey of your own life. But you've had now many experiences where you've brought other people to that point, probably faster than your own journey, which we're now up to, 10, 15 years if you're working on this?
I've been the people side of it. I've been working on so I guess the people side of it started as soon as I closed the doors.
From 2006, almost 20 years,
20 years. And it had started before that, but it wasn't easy for me to articulate what it was that I was picking up on. And that probably had started, if I look back, it had started from when I was really young. There was things that I was aware of, but I just didn't know how to explain what I was trying to explain. I mean, even me and my dad, we used to have the biggest, like, he'd say, no, you got to do it like this. I say, no, you don't. This is not right. He'd say, what do you know? You're just a little whippersnapper. You don't know anything. I said, but no, that doesn't feel right, Dad. It was always at work, and we'd have some yelling matches at one another because I had to learn to stand up for myself, which is a good thing. Yeah, so there's always been this thing, and that's the way that I can describe it, is this thing in me that has driven me, and working with the products was a really huge part of it. But it was like, it just doesn't do it for me. There's something still missing in this, and it lacked something. It lacked wholeness. It just lacked something. And that's
okay,
why.
so I'm gonna throw this out just so farmers can get a bit of an idea of what we're talking here. Because you're talking about minerals, like from any scientific or geological point of view, they would say, well, that just can't be. If you don't have boron in your soil and you need boron for fertility, you got to put it in. Or if you don't have this metal or that, things which, obviously every bit of soil is different. The geology is as it is, the way it was made when the earth formed itself. But you're saying that you're able to actually work with the animals and energetically bring about things even when those minerals are absent in the soil.
No, not saying that. I probably would have said that once upon a time. What I would say now is I'm able to work with the person to help them understand that whether or not that is really true, whether they need them. I'm not denying that if there is a deficiency of something, that something doesn't need to be put on, because if that's what someone believes, that's what they need to do. But is the belief that they need to put that on because that's what someone told them to do? Or is that what that really feels right to them that they need to do it?
So let me take it outside of that. If it was a wild situation, then there wasn't a human involved in it, what would the animals tell you?
Well, they probably wouldn't tell me anything because they'd just be doing what they're doing. So they'd just be working. If there's no human, yeah, they'd just be doing their own thing, and they'd be going around and actually just making their environment work for them.
So they'd adapt to the environment.
Yeah, they're part of, like, so are we, but they're all part of the environment. It all works together. It's through what the animals eating the grass and what comes out the other end, whether you want to call it poop or compost or whatever, is feeding something in the system. It's a whole system of nutrition cycling, but mining the nutrition. And look, what people do, and it's just great what people do. If we didn't have conventional farming, we probably wouldn't have what we have. And that doesn't mean that we have to keep farming the same way that we have. We learn from what we do. There's just better ways of doing things. It's more that we spend so much money trying to do things. What if we don't need to spend that amount of money? What if there's an easier way to do this? That's what I'm motivated by.
So that's basically where the journey is for you, is that you've come about by finding an economic change for farmers and a way of it taking out cost for them and getting the system working better without the need for those inputs.
Yeah, there may be...
If necessary.
Well, because there may be some inputs, and because there's a transition that everything needs to go through. So working with energy, you've still got a physical. The energy works quicker than the physical. And that can be, probably I'm saying that, but I'm not probably quite believing that anymore because I think it can be exactly the same. But it's only because of me working with people that I've seen just how quickly things can change in a farming environment. And I mean change like so quickly.
So I'm going to give you a bit of help with this one because right now, and I've been reading quite a bit in LinkedIn, there's a thing called quorum sensing where you would have heard within an instant of something, the mycorrhizal fungi are a bit like an internet and they instantly communicated across many kilometres right throughout the soil. So that the science of being able to read that with various pieces of tools and equipment is starting to develop. And so people are a bit like, wow, this is magic, this is amazing. And I've always said, well, I think intuitives have actually always had that ability to know it, but either couldn't articulate it or prove it or whatever. And then there were charlatans that worked out they could just say the same thing as what the one that really could tell was, because they could just do better theatrics. And so that's what kind of destroyed it while we went into this whole scientific industrial revolution. I feel we're swinging back into this integration of, at this point, we're into integration with physical tools to communicate the intuitive stuff. And people like yourself are starting to gain ground in the world because what they actually can do is starting to have scientific tools to prove it as well. So that's kind of where I'm at with talking about this in a little bit, is where the journey is.
Yeah,
at.
and the way that I would say that is the science is finally starting to catch up.
Yes, absolutely.
That's how I would, because it's like...
I'd say it's still not even quite there.
No.
Because I've been looking for tools for a long time that can say a lot of this stuff. And
yeah, but I would agree with that, because there's still, it's trying to find something. It's like trying to find something that can be sold to generate income, to be able to say, well, yes, that energy, whatever it is, it's being measured. So quantum physics is true. Like, yes, it is a true thing. And to me, quantum physics, I don't know. I mean, because that's language that someone has, they're words that have been put to something.
Quorum sensing, and quantum physics are kind of in the same space, but it's a bit like words to talk about things so small or so outside our reality we've yet to understand them, and the equipment is starting to get able to prove that what you just said is true.
Well, and quorum sensing, I do really resonate with that, because, and quorum, so a quorum is like a chorus or like a choir. It's like...
Well, it's QU, quorum is QUORUM, quorum. So I think it might be a little bit different. But
so what does quorum mean? See, sometimes the way words are put together doesn't really sort of express what the word is trying to say. Quorum sensing to me is like, energetically, I could be connected with something on the other side of the world. That's as easy.
The process of cell-to-cell communication that allows bacteria to share information without cell density and adjust gene expression accordingly. So that's in biology. Sensing quorum signaling is the process of cell-to-cell communication with bacteria. Typically, it means acclimating to environmental disadvantages. So I suppose...
So why is it only acclimating to disadvantages? What about advantages?
Well, I would just say that's the way the word has come about, but I think it's having to have more... I think it's just because it's a body of science starting to understand the way things communicate that they actually don't yet necessarily know. And so we tend to resonate with it because we go, yes, in that area.
And the way that I would probably look at that within, so because that's sort of like putting in the physical, which yes, what our heads need us to do to understand. But really, when you talk about working with energy and working with energy within yourself, and whether you're in balance or out of balance with the energy that you're generating, energetically, you can be communicating with anything, anywhere on the planet. Or probably out in space as well.
We've got to keep giving examples for people in the physical world here.
Yeah, I get it.
Lifting. Yeah. I'm going to go and draw to some of you've had 2 or 3 experiences now where you've managed to affect this realization, epiphany, change of heart. The farmer actually gets it, goes, oh, it's me, and it's coming from me, and they change something in themselves and realize they are part of this sensory or otherwise effect on the land around them. And the land, as I understood, has actually changed beneath the feet of the people that were also there. So can you talk a little bit about that experience? You were telling me there was 2 or 3 experiences where that happened, where the land physically moved under them.
Okay, so that's since I've just been working with people and took my focus off of the animals. So since I took my focus off of the external world and put my focus to working with people to work with their internal world, if I just clarify that, then some amazing things have happened. There is 3 experiences. All of them have had other people present at the same time. And while one of the carers was working through something, so one of them, we were in a paddock and there was a group of people. It was actually a mentor day, and a mentor day is when people want to sort of get together as a group and they want to understand this in a deeper way, but as a group. And we were on this particular farm, and it was the husband that was in the paddock, and we were standing in this paddock where it had been ploughed, and the particular crop, a multi-species crop that was planted, was sort of, to people's eyes, looking like it was struggling a little bit. And so we just sort of, I can't remember everything gets said, and I never do because it's in the moment. And we just got working through some things, and I remember him saying something about his connection to his home country, which was New Zealand, and he was really missing that connection. And then somehow through whatever we worked through, helped him to understand, to connect back more into himself. And no joke, it was the most weirdest feeling under everybody's feet. Some was sitting on the ground. One person was laying on the ground. Others were just sort of standing up. And it was like in an instant, under our feet, I started moving my feet. And then I just said, can anybody feel something's changed? And what happened is the ground actually softened under our feet. Now sounds like bullshit. But there was other people there, and I said, can anybody else feel this? Like what? Because that was an external thing. And and it was fortunate that as we walked into the paddock, a person that I mentor actually picked up a couple of clods of dirt. I'll call it dirt. As they walked in, and he couldn't break them apart. So anyway, as we walked out the paddock, the same person picked up these clods of dirt, which just fell apart in his hand. He goes, how'd that happen? Yeah, that was one scenario. The other scenario was
Is that almost like the mind of the farmer was so caught that it was holding all the molecules together? And by him letting go and being in himself, the land relaxed with him?
Yeah, because he was just so out of balance with himself, if I just keep it really, because he was thinking about home, not actually really able to just work with his home, which was within his boundary. And then, once he reconnected that and got that connection within himself, it just changed.
And are you finding that sort of boundary thing you talk about, which is like title boundary or the area with which the farmer has jurisdiction or hold over it? Are you observing those physical changes, like you're saying, occurring literally on the fence line between where they have an effect and the land next to it, which is not related to them?
Well, that's definitely evident at Dianeans. And yes, I am seeing it's only when people really dedicate themselves to working with themselves that they start to get that whole farm experience to where you really get to see. And then it's like the people from the outside are starting to quiz people and say, what are you doing?
You see that their actual practice is maybe not so radically different in terms of the fertilizer or the whatever they're doing may not be all that different. Like people are looking for a physical thing and it's not really the physical thing that's making the change. And that's maybe the harder thing to communicate in all of this.
Yeah, it is, because a lot of people won't necessarily then know how to say that to somebody, and some are starting to, because they are feeling confident to do that. And then a lot of people that do, like a lot of my clients that are working up, it's a whole life change. They do work differently. So where they may have been conventional, they do start working more biological. They think different. They open up to things that they couldn't open up to before. Before may not be important now. And something that should have been important that wasn't becomes important. But it's all just through that. It's like energy is everything, and energy turns into matter. So matter is the physical. You've helped me a lot by just sort of sometimes quizzing me and going, well, what is it, Jeff? What is it you do? Well, what I reckon I do is I'm able to change that matter. Well, I help people to understand, but I know that I can do this, and now I'm helping people as I can turn that matter back into energy to get it into balance, and then it goes back into matter again. And to me, that's just so simple, and I get it that that's not necessarily simple to someone else.
I want to also point out in this that when you say energy, there is physical energy, and then there is, let's say, that which is external, and I would call it spiritual energy or things that are not of the physical universe. And a little bit of what you're talking about is not of the physical universe, because it's actually more in themselves.
Well, but I disagree with that.
Part of it.
I disagree with that.
Physical.
It's very physical and it's very logical, because an atom is energy.
Yes, that's right.
An atom, so we're talking science. It is physical, 100%,
okay.
Because an atom is energy. So without atoms, we don't have energy. We've learned that through food gives us energy. That's an external way of getting energy. What I've learned is there's an internal source of energy as well. And a lot of us are not tapped into it because we have gone external and we haven't understood what this internal component of us is. Like, to have energy, you need to have both positive and negative. Like, think of a battery in a car. If you only have a negative cable and your positive cable's not on, what does the battery do? Doesn't do anything, does it? And then if you take the positive cable off and the negative one off and put the positive one on,
understand,
same thing. You have to have two cables. Now, I listen to a lot of people that talk, and a lot of people don't like negative feelings, so they'll push them away. They think that's bad. And then there's people that don't like positive feelings, so they'll push them away. The one thing that has fascinated me since I've actually started doing workshops and going out there, more so in doing my people work, is to see how many people actually cannot feel. Think they're feeling, but they're not actually feeling. So they think they're feeling and there's still an emptiness. They think something and they're stuck. They're stuck with this, what they think is a feeling like they're depressed. So they're stuck being depressed, or they're stuck being anxious. And they
stuck in a loop.
Yeah.
In a loop of thoughts.
Yeah. And that's all that they know. They don't know that they can shift that. They don't know that they can move that. Now, if they can't generate energy internally, they can't move that. So I'm finding now I'm actually working with people to help them to understand how they can generate energy so that they can become unstuck. And once they become unstuck, then they can start getting this movement within them so that they can actually start doing whatever it is that they've come in, that they want to do, whatever that is.
So that sort of really comes back to that first experience of you talking about the animals not needing energy and how do you get the energy in.
Yep.
So their blocked energy, which they're connected to with the animals because they bought the animals, they own the animals, they run the animals or whatever on their land, is actually interacting with their blocked energy.
Yeah, and I need to own this because my animals on my farm, like they were saying to me, we just want energy, Jane, we just want energy. So I was shoving starch and sugar out there for them. But all they were telling me is stop controlling me. Let me do what I need to do because I had imprinted on them. I had said that I know what you need. I had done that.
All your years and years of nutrient data.
Yeah, but all the years and years of what you learn when you're at school, you learn that it's like you grow up, and it's also probably male and female is quite different. I mean, we're very nurturing females, and I don't know many women that don't think that their job is not here to go and fix something. Like, I really don't know many, and I'm not saying they're not out there because I'm sure they are, but it's like it's our job to fix everything. So we are very multitasking, we're very multi-species, we're very diverse, and I don't know many men. I know that there's some out there, and I know there's a lot of men now that are becoming very multitasking, but a lot of men are very monoculture, and they like to just do one thing and then go to the next thing, and if they do that, they get their jobs done.
That's the hunter-gatherer evolution of focus on the animal so you can kill it to eat, and the child-rearing, multitasking thing of the female. It's very brain-wise evolved that way.
Yep.
So it makes perfect sense.
But that's all in us. Like, all of that is in us. All that's in our DNA. It's all in our blueprint. Like, all the generations before us are all in us. They're not external of us. So we are whatever our generations are. And there's things in there that I've learned within myself. There's things in there, I don't know that I really want to work that way. Well, I'm going to change that in me. I can change that in me. I can't change that in you, and I can't change that in anyone else. But I can help.
But you can influence it.
I can help people to understand that they have the ability to do that themselves. And then I've now learned tools and techniques to be able to talk a head language, to be able to help them to understand that, because most people need a program. And look, what I did over a long, long period of time was probably I was stuck in a program, and I then had to learn to let go of that, which was it's not easy going through.
So tell me, what was part of the Adelaide experience where you did go and work in Myers, I think it was?
No.
Serving.
I worked in a Ned store, and it was great. So
what store?
It was called a Ned store. So it was like a homeware store that also sold like sort of cheaper bits and pieces for kitchens and garden done
the
before.
People part of that, you're dealing with lots of people coming in. What was the thing that you confronted and handled or wanted to change, or what was the learning in that?
And this is a good question. Because what happened is when I stopped the business and started to going in doing people work, working and being around people more, I found that I was picking up on everything. And
like a radio station turned on loud.
It was too much. It was just so much. It was overwhelming because I didn't have a focus anymore. It was like, what am I doing? So my focus just become everywhere, everything. And it was like, just so much would happen. It was good. I needed it to happen. So what I had to do was learn to shut myself down. So I had to learn to put boundaries on myself. And that was a process, just learning that. And I didn't really have anybody that could help me with that. It was something I just had to learn myself. And lucky I had the questions. So one thing that I learned very early was if I'm going to muscle test, I'm going to muscle test to learn about me. Whereas a lot of people muscle test and they want to ask questions about the external world. And look, I did do a bit of that because that's sort of how it was taught to me by way certain people worked, before I started to become more familiar with it. But I found I always doubted everything I did. I just was so doubting of it. It's like, oh, what if that doesn't work? How do I know that? So once I started bringing it to me and asking about me, that's when my world really started to change. It's like, okay, I'll go, do I need to do this? Yes, you need to do this. Okay, I'll need to go do this. I'll go do this. And then I would see what would happen from doing that. And I would learn something about myself. And then it would be whatever. There was just, is it appropriate for me to eat this food? No. Can I eat this food? Yes. When I went shopping, I would ask about everything I bought. Can I buy this apple? No. That one? No, that one. That one there, I can buy that one. All right. Can I buy that one? It was
very slow.
Yeah, but I learned so much about myself.
Did you get much faster then at that?
Well, yeah, because then I learned, well, that was me asking questions because that's the way my head wanted me to work. When I started to work with my feelings and working with the energy that was inside me, I didn't need to
scan Apple, pick up the right one.
And I didn't, I just would know. And as long as I trusted that, and I probably did that anyway beforehand. So it was like I just needed something, how do people in heads work? Because I really started to realize I never probably have really worked in my head. And all these people used to say to me, oh, don't you have all this stuff in your head? Isn't it busy? Huh? What are you talking about? So I've learned that I've always felt and I've always worked with that. And then it was like I needed to turn that off and I needed to just work like other people work to understand what that was. And oh my God, that was so frustrating. But
slow. That was slow.
Yeah, so I learned that the head is way slower than feelings and working with energy. Energy is just gone, done. And then can't go back. It's already done. And if you don't grab that feeling, which I'll call it a feeling, it's energy, but I'll just to bring it to a physical sense. If you don't grab that feeling before you get a thought, you've missed the feeling. And most people, they just want to work with the thought. So that's the head language, where the feeling is before that. When you work with that feeling before the thought actually can change. It will be different thought once you start understanding it. And again, I know that's a process to even understand that, but that's how quick it is.
And I do understand what you're talking about because I've worked with something else that does that as well. It is, again, which I think before we even started talking about this podcast today, I think whatever tool the person uses is about bringing about certainty in themselves. And at the moment, your certainty is with the thought and proof in the physical world, which can be incredibly slow. It could be months.
And years.
Or years.
And a lifetime. It can be a lifetime.
Yeah. So getting to a certainty of what you're saying, the thought, the sensation before the thought, whether you want to call it feeling, emotion or whatever, because sometimes those things can be wrong as well. So you can have things that are from trauma or, let's say, what I call limbic brain. They're there to protect you from caveman period of evolution. And we've got another stream, which I look at as being higher level, lighter within ourselves, which is knowing. It's for me, when I feel it, the knowing is clear and certain. And the other one is like fear and a reaction. Does that make sense? One is a little heavier sensation and the other one is a lighter sensation. So it's not a fear, it's a certainty.
Yeah, but then are you saying that the lighter sensation is a certainty, whereas the fear is not certain?
I'm saying that's just the way I'm defining that, but that's just the way I would define the sensation of a thought that comes, something that comes pre a thought that was of a negative thing, and I can review them, the two sensations, and go, that's from something that is where that's coming from. It'll have come from something, as opposed to a intuitive knowing, which doesn't seem to have come from anywhere. It's an isness, like it's a yes, as opposed to a
Yep. Yeah. And well, there's a couple of things in that. So I feel like we do need to address emotions and feelings because to me there's a difference. So I do feel like we need to do that just for clarity. And when you come to that heavy and that light feeling, so what I find is that heavy and light feeling can actually be it's a head response, which that feeling's been identified as, or whatever it is, that emotion has been identified as heavy and that emotion has been identified as light. So there is a process that the head needs to go through before you're able to trust your intuition, because it's like, what really is this feeling, or what is this energy? What is this energy that you can generate? And a lot of people, and this is just coming from my clients. So a lot of clients tell me that they have never experienced generating the energy internally. So they've been very reliant on getting energy from external, like from a physical source, like bringing something into their body. And I'm not saying at all that we don't need to bring things into our body, right? Like food, but we maybe need a lot more food because we're not generating energy ourselves.
So could that be analogous to, let's say, those stories you hear, those fables of people going into the desert and living on nothing for 21 years, impossible lengths of time, and being able to survive on nothing, and because they had some spiritual thing occur?
And I don't know the answer to that because I haven't experienced that myself.
No. But
Yeah.
maybe from a metaphor point of view, it's that sort of thing of the energy being self-generating within itself for the body to survive.
Well, and see, because even I'm like to say physical or even spiritual, which they're all words that I have used as well. But even that, I don't even look at it like that anymore for the energy. Like, it's so funny. It's like I've come full circle. It's like I'd had the word energy from a very, very working with the animals, working with the products. And it was like, I cannot explain this energy word. And now it's like I have this understanding of this energy word and what that really means. And it's like it's like now that I understand it, I'm certain of what energy actually is. And it's not mythical, it's not spiritual, it's not physical, but it could be spiritual, it could be physical, it can be whatever words we want to put to it. It doesn't need any words put to it, because when you actually feel the energy that you are able to generate,
self-generating.
Yes, it is. And we talk about regen farming. Well, if we can't generate our own energy, then there's no such thing as regen farming. Because what I've learned is our environments are a reflection of what we do, the start of anything. So when I work with people, it is that to start with, because most people aren't ready to actually start to understand the energy bit. And even when you work with them on farm, not that I do that now, I have people I'm mentoring that will go out and work with people on farm, and they'll help them to understand things through asking questions and that. And when the person is ready to make that transition in themselves to understand that next level, then they'll come to me to understand that, so that they're equipped then with the understanding of how to work through things as they come up within them.
Even in a biodynamic farm, or someone that's really tuned into the concept of energetics, you still find they're locked onto paradigms that are not letting them open up to their sense of themselves being the journey.
Yep. There's actually someone I'm thinking of that came to one of the workshops, a young couple, very much into biodynamics. And they came to a workshop I did in Orange, absolutely beautiful young couple with a young child. And when they came to the workshop, they were so busy with just everything that was happening in everything they were trying to do, making their own wine. It was viticulture, and they didn't have time to actually sell their wine. And I had no idea until 6 months later. I'd had a couple of one-on-one sessions with them after the workshop. They decided to come to a workshop 6 months later, and they were telling me about what had happened. And their whole life changed, their whole life. And to the point that all these things that they were doing before, they just weren't doing, other than doing the work on themselves. And they were going to market, so selling their wine now. And he actually said to me, the husband, he said, I need something to do. What can I do? Because from being where he couldn't do, he had no space. He had all this space, and he's now starting to think of other ways that he can add more into what he's doing. I was flabbergasted by that. Like, I just went, what did you say? 6 months? All that's happened in 6 months. So I actually got him to talk about that in the workshop, because it was sort of over lunch that I overheard it. Because I don't necessarily, with my clients, know everything they're doing, and it's just they've got their life and they're doing what they're doing. But when I start to hear some of this feedback coming back, it's nice to know. I was grateful to know it when I did, and it was the perfect timing.
So I'm gonna talk, because we've spoken for a long time now, and I think there's only a limit to how much people can listen to. We might do a second session. My understanding from you is that there's a time when people are ready to have you in their lives, and that's not for everybody. I think the thing people don't understand that we haven't quite got into is from the point when you did start to work. I know you worked out a lot of stuff with the natural intelligence farming, but you've really gone on and worked pretty much by yourself. And you've worked, and I would say there's no website. Jane has no website. She lives in an incredibly remote place. She's got a very old email, and the only way you can get onto her is with her email or her phone number. And yet she's working with people all over the world. So, and supporting yourself and your partner as well. I don't know what your financial situation is, but you seem to make everything go right with no logical thing, no needing anything anywhere. And you didn't, even the business that you're running now, you didn't create anything before it started happening. It just keeps happening, and money just keeps flowing in. You don't even have a structure, as I see, to your charging. You just know what to charge by listening to these intuitive things. And that all seems to work out and everybody's happy with it.
Yep.
So in that in itself, I'd have to take my hat off to you because you live the words you speak and the beingness that you are. And you absolutely access and tap into the infinite possibility within yourself and the potential that we have within ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that extends to, from my carbon industry, the potential for that which the planet can do, which is only at this point even scratching the surface of what it can do, beyond even the farmers that are doing the best that they're doing. There's so much more because of the magic within the possibility that's there that we're really just scratching the surface of understanding. I think it's a very exciting time moving forward as to what you will open up in people and get them to see
what they can do first, because it's the work on self first, and it's to be able to get to understand, being able to generate that energy from internal, and then it's from there learning how to work with that with the external world. And in a farming situation, sky's the limit. It is infinite possibilities. And what can change is amazing, what can change and how quickly it can change. Like to the point, Sam, like, Jay was the first one to do a podcast with me. And I saw into that a little bit the other day. I was like, gee, I'm be so different now to what I was then. I was just so nervous. And even how I was talking.
I think the reality of what that journey is within yourself and how much you've been able to now articulate and help others find how to locate that in themselves, get to it, get access to it.
Yeah, because it's a hard thing for people to understand, because most, you don't see it necessarily, you feel it. And then a lot of people are feeling something external of themselves, but not actually feeling what is inside them. And some of that could be a real heavy feeling inside them, and they don't want to feel that. And what I do is help them to work through that so that they actually can reconnect to themselves and work with all of that, like the polar opposite. So if there is a heavy feeling there, I can help them to work through that to get to, using your words, like if that's what it was, a light feeling. And we don't want to get rid of the heavy feeling, and we don't want to actually get rid of a light feeling either. We want both the feelings, because that is the polar opposites. That is the positive and negative. And without both of those, there's no way of generating the energy. And then what happens then is there's all this space in between, and that's the infinite possibilities. And that's up to whatever the person wants to do. If they don't want to work with it, they don't have to. But yeah, I haven't met too many people that haven't. There's just been amazing things that's happened in their life.
Because it's so exciting. It's the infinite possibility.
Yeah. And some people just do like a one session and maybe think that's enough. And then I find 12 months later, they'll say, you just kept popping into my head. So, gee, I didn't know that you, like, it all worked. So they learn more because I've advanced in my way of explaining something. And I find it's probably a lot of people that are academically minded and very head focused, like they've been sort of indoctrinated. Nothing wrong with that. We need all of that. But it's like they want to know how it works. And it's an unknown. So you've really got to be able to let yourself go to the unknown to then be able to know it. And I guess that's what I learned in myself. I had to go to something so unknown and so where that's losing control initially. You're losing control of what you thought you always had control of. And then you start to understand you never had control of anything anyway. And all you really want is control of yourself. There we are. That just went bleh.
Okay. On that note, I say thank you so much for this, and we might come and revisit this again.
Yeah, there's probably bits in between this that we need to explore more. I get that. Yeah. All right.
Now that you have listened to the video, I have done a demo which goes into how she works and how one accesses this part of you within yourself. Well, in fact, it's just within me. So you have to take my word for it. But I'm being vulnerable enough to put it online because I just recently watched the Netflix adolescence show, and I think it touched a chord about the problems going on in our society. And really a lot of it comes down to this point of being able to find the authenticness within yourself. And how do you go about doing that when nothing is really showing you how to do that? So we're translating everything into something outside of ourselves. So my journey has always been about finding the authenticity within myself so I can be myself. That seems like a strange thing to say, but it's ultimately the goal is the infinite power within us is actually through the possibility to find everything that is oneself, and everybody has it within them. And this is a little moment of my journey. So I'd be interested to see if you'd like to see more. Thank you for watching.